you're not biased, right? This free online test might tell you otherwise. The implicit association test, or IAT, can reveal racial and gender biases you might not even know you have. Here's how it works. The test asks you to rapidly group a series of images and words. For instance, in one section of the race IAT, you press a certain key whenever you see a white face or a positive word. You press another key if it's a black face or a negative word. And you have to react as fast as you can. In another section, the associations are reversed. White faces go with negative words, while black faces are grouped with positive words. It turns out that 70% of test takers, white and non-white, respond more slowly when grouping black faces with positive words. The test calls this an automatic preference for white people. Other IAT tests on subjects like gender and disability have also found pervasive automatic associations that mirror social stereotypes. Your IAT results may well surprise you. Indeed, most test takers would answer on a questionnaire that white and black people are equal, and men and women should have equal pay. And many of them honestly think so. We're not talking about extremists here, but people like you and me. So what might the IAT reveal about us?
We may grow in our life to recognize that we don't endorse a particular stereotype about a group, but that doesn't mean that we lose that memory for what the culture has taught us the stereotype to be. This is a spoiler alert, but you may know that Santa Claus is not real, but that doesn't prevent you from having a full narrative about who that person is and looks like and what he does. And stereotypes are often the same way. By function of simply seeing someone from the group, one of the things we do unconsciously and automatically is pull out of memory all the information we have about the group.
And these memories shape what we perceive as reality without us realizing it. Implicit biases can be hidden in our everyday actions. When we open our inboxes and see a lot of emails, whose message do we end up replying to? Do we laugh when we hear a racist or sexist joke? When we vote, what makes us think one candidate is more competent? Research shows implicit biases can cause major inequalities on a collective scale. So, what can we do to reduce our implicit biases? First, here's some bad news.
There's widespread belief that implicit biases are so stable that they are virtually totally unchangeable. There's a lot of experiments done trying to change implicit biases. We find what I call elastic changes, which means you can get a change that you can measure 15 minutes later, but come back the next day and see if it's changed. No, it's back to what it was before.
And even if we do change implicit bias, we have some other research suggesting that its link to any individual behavior is very weak. These are kind of associations that presumably are built up over a lifetime of experience.
But still, we want to control our biases and act more fairly. Professor Greenwald has worked with Washington state judges to address implicit biases in court, and he says intentionally resisting these biases could actually backfire.
If you make the attempt to control implicit bias in real time, what you can say is have a higher bar for making a particular judgment. You actually don't know if you're operating more validly or accurately when you just sort of consciously impose a bias in the reverse direction.
If conscious control might not work, should we just be resigned to our implicit biases and do nothing? Of course not.
Your best bet is to focus on changing procedures and practices that are closely aligned with the issue that you're worried about. so that the opportunity to act on your implicit bias never pops up.
The first step is to give yourself an audit.
I really encourage what I call counting, looking at the data, seeing if disparities are occurring. And you can only check this by keeping track of it over time.
Once we identify situations prone to producing bias, we can take steps to blind decision makers to the identity of those affected by their decisions. In situations like job interviews, where decision makers will learn about demographic information, Professor Lai recommends another strategy.
When we don't pre-commit ourselves to decision-making criteria, we're more likely to act in line with potentially our implicit biases. So what you might want to do is instead give yourself the exercise ahead of time to figure out what are the criteria that are actually important rather than kind of deciding after the fact.
These are things we can all do. We can count our decisions in our professional and private lives and take action to limit the influence of bias. One thing is clear: merely wanting to change is not enough.